안녕하세요, Cloud입니다. Hey guys, Cloud here. Welcome back to another episode of How to Study Korean Lesson Recaps. This is one of my favorite lessons I've learned through How to Study Korean. The reason it's one of my favorite lessons is because when I saw my friend send a text using this form, I thought it looked really, really complicated and advanced. Then I read this lesson and felt like the lesson did such a great job at explaining it, so I really liked it. Hopefully you guys will too. Alright, let's get into it. This lesson is divided into two parts. Part 1. Describe the past tense using ton and atton or otton. So first, let's take a stroll back to lesson 3. We learned how to conjugate adjectives and describe nouns, like with the examples I give all the time, 긴 머리, and 예쁜 여자, 나쁜 학생, etc. Last lesson, we learned how to do the same with verbs, not verbs, with verbs like 좋아하는 여자, and in the present tense, 가르칠 선생님, future tense. We also learned how to do this in the past tense, like in 공부한 학생, a student who studied in the past tense. So this is kind of what we're going to be talking about today. 공부한 학생. In the past tense, this is not the only way to do it. There's actually two other ways, and we're going to talk about that here. So let's start with ton. Ton, by adding ton to a verb, you conjugate it to the past tense. Now, to, without the niyon, just to itself, has the indication or the feeling that it's something you're recalling or remembering from experience. So that's the kind of feel it has to it. So just keep that in mind. Now let's look at the coolest example of this lesson that really made this concept clear to me personally when I was studying. 내가 입은 옷 and 내가 입던 옷. Now when you look at the translation, there's no difference. They both mean the clothes I wore. But with the second sentence, remember, there's a little bit more to it. I want to give you guys an example. Think of it as two loaves of bread. One of them was made just the regular old way, and the second one had a bit of cheese put in the dough before it was cooked. So when you take a bite, they both taste pretty much the same, but there's a very slight taste in the second one of having something extra. Like they're both bread, you eat them both the same, but one of them has that faint little extra something, you know? Alright, that's enough about food. You can tell I'm obviously hungry. So what extra information does ton provide? Well, number one, it's that you recall wearing them. Like something, remember, we talked about to having the recollection feeling. So it's something you recall wearing them. Well, in this case, it'd be very weird to say the clothes I wore, but you don't actually recall ever wearing them. But it'll make more sense with other examples. The second thing that's extra is that the action happened repeatedly in the past. So saying 입던 옷 means you wore this clothes on multiple occasions and might still be wearing them to this day. Now, just as a reminder, although ton has some extra meanings and nuances attached to it, it's not really that much different from the regular 입은 옷. It might just have a little extra something, a little extra cheese in it. Now, let's look at some situations where you actually wouldn't be able to use ton. So for example, 내가 산 옷 and 내가 사돈 옷. Now, the clothes I bought. That's what these translate to, but with 사돈, you probably didn't repeatedly buy the same article of clothing, so the second one sounds very weird. Now let's look at some sentences. 이거 엄청 좋아하던 노래였어요. I really love this song. 제가 좋아하던 여자애가 있었어요. I had a girl I used to like. Now, let's use atton or otton instead of just ton. So we're adding an at or ot depending on the conjugation, and let's see what happens. So 내가 입었던 옷. Oh, one more. There we go. The main difference between 입었던 and 입던, or just ton and otton in general, is the fact that in 입었던, it indicates that it's complete and it's not currently occurring. So in the clothes example, this is clothes that I used to wear but don't anymore. Versus 입던 is clothes that I wore and might still be wearing to this day. So let's look at some examples. 그 컴퓨터는 작년에 샀던 거예요. That's the computer I had used last year. 우리가 지난번에 먹었던 곳에서 먹고 싶어요. I want to eat at the place that we ate at last time. Alright, so far, we've been adding 톤 and 어떤 to verbs, but we can also use them with adjectives. When adding 어떤 or 어떤 to an adjective, it works basically the same way as a verb. But when you're adding 톤 to an adjective, it gives the impression that whatever you're describing just finished. So, for example, if you're a teacher and you leave the classroom and you notice that the class starts making a lot of noise because there's no teacher in the classroom, then when you finally come back, everyone quiets down. You could describe the classroom as, where is it? There we go. 시끄럽던 교실. A class that was noisy, but just stopped being noisy because you just came back. Versus something like 예뻤던 여자, a girl who used to be pretty. She stopped being pretty at some point in the past, and now at this point she's still not pretty because she stopped being pretty. Just an example. If you were to say though, 예쁘던 여자, it would sound a bit weird since when would you ever want to say, oh, that girl was pretty until just a second ago, then she stopped being pretty? There might be a situation for it, but let's look at a sentence. There we go. 따뜻하던 날씨가 비가 오고 나서 추워졌어요. The weather that I remember being warm until now got cold after it rained. Again, these are all nuances. It's not, you wouldn't always translate it this way. You could also translate as the warm weather got cold after it rained, or the weather that was warm got cold after it rained. You don't have to, in English, you might not always translate it that way, but there's those feelings, that little extra something. That's all for this lesson. I don't have any other videos to link for you guys, like I normally do, but there is something relatively new in the description, so go ahead and check it out.